Welcome back for another episode of Mainly Hoops podcast, episode 3 now. And today we'll be diving into the KenPom and AP poll rankings and some of our reactions to some of those teams that were maybe too high, too low. We're also going to take a deeper dive into the outlook on some of the top freshmen and maybe some of the other ones that aren't as talked about, but we might be higher on. And then we'll dive into the exciting stuff, some of the games that are coming up, with games starting in just 2 days. We're now less than 48 hours away from tip-off, and we'll mention some other games very briefly that are of note, and then, as we talked about at the end of last podcast, we'll play a game called Where He Transfer. That's a spinoff of NBA on TNT's Who He Play For. So a lot of fun stuff for today's show. Excited to get to it. So we'll jump right in today. The first team we're going to talk about in the KenPom rankings is Wake Forest, and I know KenPom had them at 44, Cody, but you definitely were quick to disagree with that, as am I. But I know you took a much deeper dive into that one.
Yeah, I mean, I had them much higher than this. I have them at 22 personally, as opposed to 44. Just it does seem super low. There are some teams on there that just don't make a ton of sense, and obviously we'll get into it. But I don't think it's giving the defense enough credit for like the roster improvements that they made. We've talked about it a little bit on the last couple pods. Adding Trevon Spillers and Omaha Blue is massive for what this team needed to adjust from last year. The defense was a little bit weak on the interior outside of Efton Reed, so that was massive for them. And the thing is, Steve Forbes seems to be a little bit of a guard whisperer, honestly, especially with the transfer guards. The guards that he's brought in the last 3 years through the portal have all had a ton of success. Like you look at Alondas Williams from 2022 or 2023, I believe, and then like Tyree Appleby as well. He was the 2022. Alondas Williams was 2021. Appleby 2022, and then Boopie Miller last year, who's since moved on to SMU, but he saw a ton of success last year. I believe he averaged close to 17 points a night. And now they bring in a Louisville transfer, Tyler Johnson, who, I should see a little bit better coaching than what he had with Kenny Payne. That was an absolute disaster. And he has a lot of talent, and he's got a lot of burst off the dribble as well. He's going to be able to make some plays for Salas and Hildreth, take the pressure off of Salas a little bit.
And really small guy. Really small guy, though.
He is small, super quick. I actually think he's a pretty good defender too, point of attack wise. Like he's not going to do any damage on the interior defensively, but just keeping his man in front of him, being like a bit of a defensive playmaker, making some steals, getting out in transition is going to be big. And for me, I don't think there's really a true weakness on the surface with this team. At least there might be some as the games. I definitely expect this team to make the tournament for the first time in the Forbes era, which seems kind of crazy. This is his 5th year there, and he's never ended up breaking through. Last year, he had a really good chance. A lot of people thought Wake should have made it last year. I mean, I think they rated 25th in KenPom when the tournament came around. But obviously, you can't just throw in the top KenPom teams into the tournament. You have to actually do work during the ACC schedule, during the non-conference schedule. And, the committee didn't think they did enough. I think they're going to do plenty this year. Wouldn't surprise me if they were a 5 or 6 seed come tournament time.
Right. And as we talked about last time, it also wouldn't be very surprising if they finish second in the ACC regular season, right?
Absolutely.
I expect North Carolina to be in that spot, but I wouldn't be shocked if Wake Forest ended up there either. They're definitely talented enough.
For sure. The shot makers are going to carry them a long way. It's going to give them a higher ceiling than they've had in the past.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Wake Forest, especially, Salas is back. He obviously made a huge leap last year after 2 tough years at Gonzaga where he really never broke through as a 5-star recruit, I believe. And he just didn't break through there, but has really found his spot at Wake Forest now.
That's the thing. He never really got his chance at Gonzaga,
It
But
was
the time
too
that he
tough,
was,
right? Their
yeah,
teams were too good.
the time he was on the floor, like he didn't look like anywhere near the player he is right now at Wake. Like
No.
he has the ability to make shots off the dribble at an elite rate. Like he's a good shooter. He didn't do any of those things at Gonzaga. He was known more as like kind of a 3-and-D piece that the three ball needed some work. And,
Yeah.
he completely figured it out over one offseason.
And he was just playing behind such good guards there too. So like the confidence level of a 5-star guard who went from playing every minute at his high school to then stepping in and playing, maybe 10, 12 minutes a game because he's not at the level that Mark Few needs for a national championship contender. That's got to be tough on your confidence. So I'm definitely glad to see him get that confidence back last year. And I'm really excited to see him build on that this year.
Absolutely.
So, that's one team that I think we can both agree is definitely underrated in KenPom. As for teams that are overrated, my personal favorite, Villanova, I don't understand. I really don't. They last season, as we talked about, they were 18-16, 10-10 in the Big East, got to the NIT, but lost a lot this year. They lost TJ Bamba, Justin Moore, Tyler Burton, Mark Armstrong, Hakeem Hart, right? A lot of their depth pieces. So the guys that really played the bulk of the minutes are gone. The only true high minute player that's back is Eric Dixon. Now, as we talked about in the last episode, Eric Dixon is probably going to be a first team all Big East player, right? There's no denying that. But outside of him, it just feels like a bunch of guys that are kind of misfits. I do like Wooga Poplar, but I'm not sure about their guards are very uncertain. Jameer Brickus, Jordan Longino is there, but I just don't see it with this team. I don't think their coach is very good. They weren't good last year. In my opinion, I think they got less talented this year. Maybe they'll play better together, but I think they got less talented. And ultimately, like Eric Dixon, as good as he is, he doesn't make this team a top 20 KenPom team, right? They're ranked 20th in KenPom, right? They're ahead of teams who I'm very high on, like Arkansas, Florida, some of these SEC schools, and we have Villanova at 20. I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a little more optimistic about this team than you are, and I personally have them at 41. So it's really not even close.
I think I really think like top 50 I'm cool with, right? I think top 50 is definitely a spot they can be because they do have a top 30 player in the country, right? Top 25 player in Eric Dixon, right? So I'm cool with that. It's just 20 is like 41 I could live with. 20, no.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little optimistic about the backcourt. The creation is going to be a little bit better than it was last year, certainly. When you have Justin Moore and guys like Tyler Burton trying to initiate offense, it didn't really work out for them. But they're going to have to some of the freshmen are going to have to do some work. They have a couple 4-stars coming in, Matthew Hodge, and then you have Chris Parker coming from Alabama, the redshirt freshman. Those guys are going to have to play. And I do think Neptune likes those guys, the long, like rangy wings that can defend multiple positions. But they're going to have to do work on the offensive end, especially the first 2 games of the year with Eric Dixon being suspended for playing in the Portsmouth Invitational. So, like, you look at the first 2 games, like, who knows? They play a super slow pace, and they can keep a team in the game that's solid defensively. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, they got taken to the wire. I believe they start with Lafayette, like, obviously not a great program, but you're going to have to look out especially if the defense isn't there too. I think KenPom's giving Villanova a little bit too much credit for the defense right now. I think he had them like 19th overall defensively, and they lost every single good defensive piece that made this team what it was. Like Moore, Burton, Bamba, Hakeem Hart were all those good wing defenders that this team wanted. and what Neptune wanted, and they lost all those guys. So the defense is going to have to adjust.
Yeah, no doubt. And they're really prone to playing close games. Like, I have no doubt that they're going to hang around with a lot of teams just because of the pace that they play, right? I mean, last year it felt like every game was like, oh, Villanova's in a tight one with Marquette. Villanova's in a tight one with UConn, but ultimately, like, their offense, their playmaking just isn't good enough. But because of their pace of play, because of their traditionally at least solid defense, they're physical, they'll hang around in games. But I don't see them as being a top 20 team in KenPom.
We saw them lose to like 3 Big 5 teams. I think they went 1-3 against Big 5 teams last year. Just like they hadn't figured anything out. Like they came back from the Bahamas,
Temple and
they lost to Temple. I believe they lost to LaSalle and they lost to Penn. Like they lost to, I believe they lost to all of those teams.
Yeah.
And like they just keep teams in games too often. And if the offense isn't going to be good enough to break away, if the half court offense isn't good enough, it's not gonna work out.
Yeah. At the end of the day, this team just needs Jay Wright back, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. So enough about Villanova. I don't want to talk about them anymore. But your next team that you took a look at was Dayton. They were ranked, if I'm not mistaken, they were ranked in the top 30 of KenPom, which, I had them in my top 5 of mid-major teams, but top 30 in the country seems a bit high.
Yeah, it is way too high. They have them at 27. I personally have them at 57. So it's really not even close. I do think the mid-major crop in general is a bit down. I mean, you look at the top of the A10 is solid, and Dayton's right up there at the top. I personally have VCU as a better team in the A10 overall. That's my number one team in that conference. But I think KenPom gave them too much credit for the defense. You lose a guy like Deron Holmes, and he's a great rim protector, and your defense is going to fall off, especially with the replacement that they brought in Zed Key, Ohio State down transfer, but super offensive minded. He actually cut weight this offseason. It's going to hurt him on the interior defensively. You bring in Posh Alexander, who he's a great individual defender, probably one of the best point of attack defenders in the country. Moves super well. It's like big frame for being 6'1", 6'2". But I'm personally not that much of a fan. And there's no great individual defenders outside of him. So, and this group finished 81st defensively in KenPom last year, and that's with Deron Holmes, the rim protector that he was. You lose that, and I don't understand how you get to a top 20 defense in the country with that loss. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Even on the offensive end, like this was a more offensive heavy team last year, and I still think they're pretty good on that end. You kept a guy like Nate Santos. You're going to get Malachi Smith back, who knows how long he's going to play. He's been hurt, but he's a great player when healthy. Just you lose Deron Holmes, and it's going to be an adjustment on both ends of the floor. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this KenPom ranking slide down significantly when the season starts.
Yeah, no, and that wasn't the only player they lost, right? I mean, they lost significant shooting, right? They lost Kobe Bray, right? And
yeah, huge loss,
right? I mean, that's a massive loss for them outside of home. So, I don't expect this offense to be at the level that it was at. The defense definitely not. I think you're right. I think they're going to make a quick slide down the rankings. I don't know who they open with or what the beginning of their schedule looks like.
I think it's a pretty light schedule at the beginning of the year. So
yeah, so maybe they'll hang around, and we'll continue to talk about how overrated they are. But who knows? I don't see them.
Yeah, I mean the defensive rating makes zero sense to me. Like you can't finish 81st with your best interior defender leaving and get significantly better. Like Posh Alexander is not moving the needle that much, although he is a great perimeter defender. But like having one perimeter defender isn't going to move you up ratings that much, especially in the preseason. Like it's just not.
Yeah, no,
just completely disagree with it.
Yeah. So we're on a bit of a hot stretch here. Going to talk about our third team that we think is too high. So KenPom's taking a hit, but the next team we're going to dive into is Iowa, who KenPom has ranked at 31. Personally, I have them near the bottom end of the Big Ten, right? And KenPom has them ranked 31st in the country. I don't quite understand it. They lost their best guard in Tony Perkins. They lost their best big man in Krika. The Big Ten also, as we talked about, is overrated, and so I don't see how all those things put together. Like Peyton Sanford's a good player, right? But he's going to have to carry them if Iowa wants to sniff the top 30 of KenPom, right? So to me, being at 31, I don't see them as being a better team than Rutgers. I had Rutgers personally ranked 9th in the Big Ten in my preseason rankings, and Rutgers was something like 15 spots behind them or something like that. Rutgers was 63rd. So, I think that just doesn't make sense to me. Iowa just isn't that deep. Feels like Fran McCaffrey's time has kind of passed. It feels like that whole program has really lost the step. And so unless Peyton Sanford is able to carry them, I mean, don't get me wrong, Owen Freeman's a good player. Josh Dix is going to have to step up this year, but I don't see how that collection of guys is warranting of a top 35 KenPom ranking.
Yeah, I mean, and Sanford he doesn't profile as a true number one option.
No.
So, and they've always kind of had that number one guy you can go to. Guys like, Luka Garza a few years back, Keegan Murray, Chris Murray. They didn't really have a true number one option last year either, and they especially don't have it this year. But
they weren't even good last year, right? I mean,
no, they weren't.
They were 19 and 15, 10 and 10 in the Big Ten. Sure, they made the NIT, but like for a team to be ranked 31st in KenPom, like you'd think they had a better resume last year and returned guys like Tony Perkins and Krika.
Right. And like for me, like I'm never really worried about the Hawkeye offense. Like they play in transition a ton and they take care of the ball at an elite level. Every single team that Fran McCaffrey's had is taking care of the ball. So that's going to boost your analytical profile. And defensively, I do think they got better, but like they finished in the top. I mean, they finished in like the 175 range of KenPom the last 2 years. Like Owen Freeman, probably one of the better interior defenders he's had in the last 5 years, but he's not going to boost you to like a top 80 rating like he has them. Like they're still easily outside of the top 100 defensively. So yeah, I agree. I don't have this team at 33. I have them closer to 55. I believe I have them at 56. And that was like me being optimistic about this team. But
yeah,
like they don't have the star power and the defense is never really going to be that good. They don't have any good individual defenders outside of Freeman and maybe Seydou Traore coming off the bench, but that's about it for me.
Like is Sanford really going to be able to like put the ball on the deck and go get them buckets when they need it? Like I don't see that, right? He's like a come off pin downs and knock down shots, right? But he's not the kind of guy. So it's going to have to be by committee if they're going to be anything. But I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what they brought in Drew Thelwell for Morehead State to be like that point guard, and when the game slows down in the half court, he's gonna have to make plays for everyone. But he had turnover issues at Morehead State, and I don't think he's an elite shot maker. So it's going to be an adjustment on the offensive end.
And if you had turnover issues at Morehead State, you're going to the Big Ten now, which, as we said, we're not that high on the Big Ten, but it's still the Big Ten, right? You're playing against much better defenders than you were at Morehead State. So, definitely not as high on Iowa as KenPom is. But anyway, moving on. The next team that you took a look at, Cody, was Illinois. So I'll let you dive into them.
Yeah, and this will be the fourth consecutive team that we're low on. I believe Illinois is in the AP top 25, and they're also in the top 25 of KenPom. I believe they're sitting at 23. I have them at 43 personally. There's just not enough. What do you call it? There's not enough experience with this group. This group, as a collective, like they haven't done anything together, and the roster construction seems a little weird. They're going to have to work through 2 European freshmen in Jack Kachunas and Ivisic. Although Ivisic is 21 years old, so he's a little bit older. I mean, he's older than Big Z, who's already been in school for a year. That's his brother, by the way. And it typically takes these European transfers a little bit of time to adjust their game, especially with the college basketball game being so much older than it is with the COVID year now. And obviously, there's projected talent on this roster. You bring in Kylan Boswell, guys like Trey White, guys I'm not like super, super high on. And, the spacing could turn into a little bit of an issue, especially if Jack Kachunas doesn't elevate his game from the European level. And I mean, he looks like he's going to play the point, and Boswell doesn't really profile as that off-ball guard. But I'm going to need to see them perform well in live action before I back this team at all.
Yeah, I agree. And I think spacing is definitely going to be an issue, right? I mean, Ty Rodgers, one of the most insane stats I've ever seen. He's a junior, and he hasn't yet to take a 3-point shot, right?
And teams give it to him too, and he doesn't take it.
He's, I mean, how tall is he? He's just like
6'6",
like 6'5", 6'6" guard wing, and he has not taken one 3-pointer in 2 seasons, and he's played solid minutes for them, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. But yeah, Illinois, I'm with you. Illinois shouldn't be ranked as high as they are. They lost a lot last year between Shannon, and then a lot of these other creators for them. Damask had a great year last year. Coleman Hawkins, their whole interior presence. Now they have a Vicic, but who knows? As you said, it takes some of those European guys a little bit of time to adjust. So who knows what that's going to look like on the interior. I'm really concerned with that part. So 23 seems very premature. I don't see it with them. Obviously, Brad Underwood's a good coach and all, but the guard dynamic, the floor spacing, the interior uncertainty feels like a bad recipe for success. So, I'm down on them until they prove it, as you said.
Right, especially them being top 25 in the AP poll. Like, what has the media seen with this group to lead them to vote them in the top 25? I mean, I guess it's just pedigree. You lose your entire roster.
Is it simply just a respect thing after they made the Elite Eight last year? I mean, look at TCU. After they made the national championship in football, the next year they were thrown in the top 25 and they lost week 1 to Colorado, and were never to be heard from again. So who knows if that will be the situation here, where they're just kind of in it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then fizzle out and we never hear from Illinois again this year. So who knows?
I mean, I could care less about the AP poll anyway. So
right, yeah.
Regard.
So. And the final team we're going to talk about, a 5th straight that we think is just ranked too high, or at least I do anyway, is Northwestern. Again, going to go back to Rutgers. I have them ranked 9th, and I ranked Northwestern 15th in the Big Ten. And Rutgers is 14 spots or 12 spots behind them. Northwestern was ranked at 50, I believe. 51 in the KenPom. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me. They lost Boo Buie, who time and time again over the last several seasons has just saved them. When they were down, seemed like they had no chance. Boo Buie really made things happen and carried them to victory oftentimes. Now they don't have that anymore. Boo Buie's graduated. They're going to rely on a lot of different players. They're going to have guys step up, like Barnheiser, Ty Berry, Jalen Leach, who transferred over from Fairfield, and Martinelli, who I did talk about last time as a player that I look to make a breakout this season. But there's no true number one scoring option here. it's again going to have to be a team that kind of does it by committee. And the defense is another thing that concerns me, right? Their interior defense is really weak. Matthew Nicholson is their starting center, and he's no shot blocker whatsoever. So I have my concerns there. I think they'll be okay. They'll hang around in some games, but I just don't see, without Boo Buie being there to save them, I don't see how they're ranked in the top 50 or 51 of KenPom.
Yeah, I would agree. I have them a little bit higher, most likely, than you do. I personally have them at 54, but I could easily see it falling apart pretty quickly. I think they believe that either Jalen Leach or Barnhizer is going to make the leap into being like a Boo Buie, but I don't really see that for the offense. And for the defense, like I don't mind.
Barnhizer just feels a little bit like rigid. I don't know if his game's smooth enough to become that Boo Buie type guy.
Yeah, no, definitely not yet. I believe is he a senior or fifth year senior? There's not like a ton of development left in his game. Yeah, I mean at the college level, like he basically is what he is, unless we haven't seen the on-ball usage like skyrocket to the Boo Buie level.
I'm like I was a little bit higher on Martinelli just simply because he's a junior. He showed flashes at the end of last year. So he has a little bit more of a runway to improve and really kind of break out for this team. Whereas these other guys, they're starting, I believe, 3 5th years and a senior in Barnhizer. So, especially after this year, like the direction of this program, it seems like they're going to be hurting a little bit.
Yeah, once this entire group is gone, I do think it could be ugly. It could be the old Northwestern that we're used to not being at the top, like a team that just couldn't even get close to the tournament. I think they're coming off back-to-back tournament appearances now. So
and they hadn't made it. I think they made it for the first time ever in like 2019 or something. So
yeah, they were one of the last Power 5 teams to ever make the tournament. So
yeah, that doesn't even seem possible. But yeah, I get it. I guess from them being a Power 5 and being as high as they are in KenPom, but to me, it's more about the teams that they're ahead of, right? Like I look at Miami, Rutgers is another one. I like some of these other teams on here, like Louisville. I don't see how they're going to end up better than those teams, but maybe I'm wrong. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Collins can keep the defensive floor kind of high, like with the style that he plays. He likes to force a ton of turnovers. He's never had like truly elite, like one-on-one individual defenders. So he likes to load up in the lane, keep teams away from the rim, which is a good strategy in the Big Ten when you have a lot of teams that like to play post up. He traps every single post up. So that helps in conference for sure. And they've given Purdue problems. They beat them each of the last 2 seasons. But overall, the defense definitely is a little bit weaker. You lose Boo Buie, who somehow was National Defensive Player of the Year last year, which absolutely makes zero sense to me. He was like the 3rd best defender on a borderline top 100 defense. So yeah, that's another conversation. But
they just give that award out for heart.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all. It should have gone to Kalkbrenner at least one of these 3 years that he's been elite.
Right. Hopefully our prediction comes true and he'll win it this year.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's kind of where we're at on the KenPom AP poll stuff. Obviously, there are a lot. We could talk about every team and talk about whether we think they're too high, too low, or just right. But those are some of the ones that stuck out to us. Now, shifting gears now to talk about some of these freshmen. We've talked about some of them in greater lengths, but want to talk about some different ones that haven't come up yet. But we'll just start with the obvious. We got Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, and BJ Edgecombe. Those seem to be the top 4 clear-cut freshmen, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the talk about Cooper Flagg has made, I think, every other prospect in this class severely underrated because none of these other guys get talked about. Like the guys we're going to talk about, I don't besides Con Knipple because he goes to Duke, but nobody gets talked about, and I just think it makes them severely underrated, and nobody even knows who these guys are.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like if it weren't for Flag this year, I think like the media would be all over Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, right? They're 2 5-star players at Rutgers. Like they might get to host game day this year, and they're like one of the only schools that's never hosted it.
For sure.
Right?
I mean, this class without Flag is a pretty damn good class. But I mean, you add Flag to it, and it could potentially be an elite NBA draft class too.
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely high on this, as we'll talk about as the season wears on. Definitely high on this class in terms of their NBA prospects. It's really deep, and these 4 obviously are the top ones. But I know one in particular you wanted to talk about, Cody, is Carter Bryant over at Arizona. Kind of a freshman that really doesn't get much screen time at all.
No, I mean, I had heard of him, but I hadn't been able to watch all that much on him just because every sort of freshman content I get is about Flag, which like he deserves all of it in the world, all the content he gets in the world. But the traits for Carter Bryant, the physical traits, they jump off the page. He's an unbelievable athlete. He's going to play the 3 or the 4 at times off the bench for Tommy Lloyd, and I think he has elite recovery skills. He's just the raw traits are absolutely there from this guy. And he's not going to be this crazy shot creator. He's not going to go out there and average 12 to 15 points a game just because of the role that he's going to get. The front court's pretty clogged there, but he can hit jumpers when he's open in the corner or just in general when he's open. And the dribble pull-up game is solid. He's not going to do a ton in the creation aspect of the game, but he does actually. He prefers to get to the rim, uses his athleticism, and he's a solid above the rim player. Yeah, and like I said, the front court rotation is pretty locked up. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were games where he only played 8 to 10 minutes. But I do think he's going to play his way onto the floor and play significant minutes for this group at some point. And he's the guy that they need. I mean, the backcourt isn't so great depth-wise, and he's probably going to have to take over some ball handling duties, at least in the secondary department. He's not going to play any point guard or anything like that. But overall, I think this guy's super underrated. And if the offensive game can come along a little bit more, I could see him flying up draft boards. I'm not completely sure where he's at right now. I haven't done much NBA draft stuff, but I could see him easily landing in the lottery.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, the physical traits are definitely there. For me, one of the guys I wanted to talk about is, as you mentioned, Con Knipple. We did talk about him a little bit last episode, but just wanted to give him a little bit more screen time. He's really taken off in this preseason, right? Coming in, it seemed like it was going to be Caleb Foster that was starting. And now the most recent lineup projections have Knipple starting, Foster to the bench, Sion James in the starting lineup. So it seems like Con has really broken out. And in these exhibition games, it's really shown. He plays with a ton of confidence. Obviously, really great player. Came in as a 5-star, but it seemed like his opportunity wasn't going to come right away, at least in the starting lineup. But the way that he's played, I know some people are calling him, the next Reed Shepherd. I don't know if it's that dramatic yet, but he looks the part. Plays with a ton of confidence. He's obviously going to look good playing the way that he does, knocking down shots and playing around Cooper Flag and some of these other guys that Duke has, Tyrese Proctor. So playing alongside those guys, it's got to be a lot easier. He's a player, obviously, we've spent some time on already, but just wanted to give him a little bit more screen time because I'm pretty excited about him, and didn't know a ton about him coming into this preseason until he's really broken out, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty much everything this team needs. I mean, they didn't really have any sort of great movement shooting. Like they had guys like Mason Gillis and James. They're not movement shooters. They're just more stand in the corner and hit shots when you need them to, especially Gillis. But
Yeah.
even on the defensive end, I think he's a physical defender that moves his feet well. I'm not saying he's like doesn't have elite instincts or elite like playmaking on the defensive end like Reed Shepherd did. Like he's such an elite defender that nobody gives him credit for. But he's absolutely going to fit in playing with guys that are more ball dominant like Flag and Tyrese Proctor and Foster a little bit that kind of need to have the ball in their hands on the offensive side to have success. Obviously, Flag can do a bunch of other things, especially on the defensive end, but he's really going to help out Knipple, and Knipple's going to help them out too by being able to space the floor at all times and opening up driving lanes for the playmakers.
Yeah. No, I agree. And the other player that I had on my radar was Boogie Fland, who I think we talked about a little bit in the first episode, as being that guy for Arkansas that really needs to come along for them to maybe reach their peak. They lack a little bit of that creator on-ball guard that a great team needs, right? The interior that they have, really good, really deep, right? They have John L. Davis, DJ Wagner, Carter Knox, but they're lacking kind of that guard that can get downhill and create shots for others. And from what we've seen in this preseason, it seems like Boogie Fland can become that guy. I think he's a physical guy, strong guard that it's really just going to come down to whether he can make the right decisions and get the ball where it needs to go, right? Because this team doesn't necessarily need him to score much. They have some scoring options. John L. Davis, obviously at the forefront, but they don't need him to come out and score a ton of points. They really just need him to come in, create, and get shots for guys, because that's something they're really lacking, especially against some of these teams that are going to turn up the pressure in the SEC. They're going to need Fland. So from what I've seen so far, it looks like he could potentially become that guy. I'm going to need to see more to really believe that, but I'm definitely excited about Boogie Fland, more so than I was coming into the year.
Yeah, I mean, he looked great in the preseason too. And he's actually, I mean, he's a lot bigger and more physical than I thought he was too. When I pictured him, I always thought he was like this 5'10", 5'11" guard that was kind of like Rob Dillingham-esque. But Fland is 6'2", 6'3", long arms, and like can actually do some work on the defensive end as opposed to Dillingham. But I think Fland might actually push Davis off the ball a lot more. So Davis can be more in like his role that like he played a lot of on ball at FAU, but those guys kind of worked off of each other and there was no true point guard there. I think Davis is going to be more comfortable off the ball, getting sent off screens and can make plays off the dribble and in the pick and roll when he has to. But Fland is probably going to come off the bench, be the sixth man here, but still get 25 to 28 minutes a game. And he's going to take the pressure off guys like Davis and Wagner, although Wagner looked pretty good in the preseason as well. But I do think Fland is he's ready to break out. I think he's ready right now.
Yeah. I like that for Davis. I don't know if you remember last year in the tournament when FAU played Northwestern, those last couple possessions when FAU was trying to put the game away and ultimately ended up losing in overtime, right? They just didn't have a place to go, right? It was basically just Martin tried to go one-on-one to score, and then Davis dribbled it up top and ended up taking some off-balance step-back three-pointer that didn't even hit the rim, I don't think. So I think that he would strongly benefit from having a guard that can get downhill and allow him to come off of those screens and get to his spots a little bit more easily than having to dribble to those spots.
Yeah, and I don't really think Davis is comfortable like going downhill consistently. I think he's way more comfortable just probing up top on the wing at the top of the key and try to hit perimeter shots off the dribble.
Yeah.
I do think he's going to get put in way better spots. Like Flan can get downhill. He can beat
probably
most players in the country off the dribble just with a straight line drive. But he's going to open up a lot of these guys' games, and I think it's going to make Arkansas pretty good right away.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think if he can be what Arkansas needs him to be, I think that we could be talking about them jumping up the AP poll, jumping up in our personal rankings pretty quickly.
Absolutely, I agree.
And then the final player you had on your radar was Asa Newell down at Georgia. Another player that doesn't really get talked about much because he's at Georgia, right?
Yeah, and he's an Athens guy. He's from Athens, Georgia, so hometown kid here. I think he was the number 11 prospect, and he was overshadowed by guys like Flag, Queen, and McNeely because he played with all three of those guys at Montverde. And you never really got to see the offensive game blossom like I believe it's going to. I mean, he has a versatile skill set, and he's the type of guy that Mike White loves to have on his roster. You look back at the Florida teams; they all had elite like tweener wings, like the 3-4 could step up and play small ball 5, could defend multiple positions and defend at the rim. So him playing alongside like guys like Justin Abson from App State or another freshman, Santos Cyril, that you're going to have Newell at the 4. That's going to provide a high floor, great rim protection, and he can step out and make some plays on the perimeter guarding smaller guys as well. And this will allow Mike White to play the pressure style defense with his guards that he loves to play. And, for the offensive side, Newell can space the floor a little bit. Maybe he was the beneficiary of being on an elite team and getting more open shots. And maybe it was the shots that these other high school programs were giving to Montverde. But I do think the jumper looks pretty good, especially for his size. And the only thing that I would say he needs to work on with his offensive game is actually using his right hand. He's predominantly with his left hand, driving downhill with his left in post-up situations, always going over the right shoulder, using the left hook. That's one thing that he needs to improve. But, I mean, he's got burst, and he's going to be able to beat a lot of different four-man off the dribble. So I'm pretty high on Newell overall.
Yeah, I think the other thing that he really has going for him is that he plays at Georgia again, right? Like going to be a bottom-level team in the SEC. And so he's going to have the runway to kind of make mistakes and learn, right? So for him to have that, I think it really bodes well for his future, more so than anything, right? His future in the NBA or if he plays another year of college basketball, right? It's going to bode well for him in that sense because he's going to be allowed to make mistakes and not get subbed out, right? Because there's not the pressure of, I know Georgia – Mike White can probably tell the team that, hey, we're going in there trying to win a national championship, but that's just not the reality, right? They're not good enough to be at that level. And so he's going to let him play through mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So I definitely, aside from those other things, obviously he's a great player, but I think that is one of the best things he has going for him.
For sure. From a development standpoint, being more on ball, it's really going to help him. But, I mean, there's not a ton of great players around him to really open up his game on the offensive side. This is a super defensive-minded team that's going to have to get out and play in transition. He fits that mold. But, you might not see super great efficiency numbers out of the guy. But I do believe NBA draft scouts are going to know or see that he's not playing with the greatest players and his game's not going to be opened up. And it's more of the defensive traits that he has and the more versatile skill set that's going to get him those NBA looks.
Yeah, no, I agree. So that kind of wraps up our preseason talk. We got games starting, as I said at the beginning of the show, in less than 48 hours now. So now we're just going to take a dive in, look at some of these top games, talk about a few others. But now the exciting stuff happens, right? We're going to be full go all the way through that first weekend of April now.
Yeah, I mean, I've had enough of all the preseason prep. I mean, I'm definitely just ready for the games to get started. There's a lot of games, a lot of not so intriguing games on opening night. And there's not many games on Tuesday, which doesn't make a ton of sense. I don't know why these programs don't schedule bigger games to be played on Tuesday as well. Like, give me a more balanced schedule here. I get to watch 6 or 7 games on Tuesday that basically mean nothing. But
All right, we're
I'm
gonna
just
watch
happy
like
games are back in general.
Tuesday will be like Southwestern Louisiana against Texas A&M,
Yeah.
Corpus Christi, or who knows, right?
Yeah.
It's a shame, but anyway, we have some big games. We do have a few big games on Monday. One of those being Baylor and Gonzaga playing in Vegas, I believe, right?
Spokane.
Spokane.
Not in the kennel. They're playing in Spokane Memorial Arena, where they play a few home games every year, or a few neutral site, if you want to call it that.
That's where they played. That's where they played Kentucky last year.
Kentucky,
the year before.
2 years ago, and then they played UConn there last year and got smoked.
Yep. So definitely this is a top 10 matchup, right? Baylor coming in, as we talked about, that's a team that I had in my preseason Final Four. But they have a little bit of ways to go, I think. Gonzaga a little bit more experienced, but definitely going to be a fun matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a fun, fast-paced, super offensive heavy game because the defenses aren't in necessarily fantastic spots right now. But I'm super excited to watch Edgecombe, a freshman we talked about a little bit at the top. And I think he has a pretty good matchup here. The Gonzaga perimeter defenders aren't really all that good. You're going to ask a guy like Nemhard, Nolan Hickman, or Khalif Battle to stay in front of one of the most explosive guards in the country. I don't think it's going to bode all that well. And then with the backline rim protection, like EK is not a rim protector. He's more of, post up big, high efficiency on offense. But overall, I do think they're going to feel the loss of Anton Watson a little bit, especially in a matchup like this. I do like Ben Gregg as a replacement, but Watson did so many great things for this team. And I do think they see a hit on the defensive end. And as for Baylor, I do need to see it from the defense. I'm a little more optimistic about the defense, especially with the perimeter. But, the interior defenders, especially in this matchup, they're going to have trouble with guys like EK and Greg and then Braden Huff off the bench. Like Ojan Wuna and Norchad Omir are super offensive-minded guys. I mean, I don't even know if I'd call Ojan Wuna an offensive-minded guy. He's kind of just a placeholder for this team. I don't want to slander Ojan Wuna all day, but they're not known for their defensive prowess. And I do think it's gonna take this defense some time. And overall, I would give Gonzaga the slight edge just because they're more established. And I do think their offense is it's a top tier unit in the country with that guard play and with EK's post up game. So I'll take Gonzaga in a pretty tightly contested, high scoring game.
Yeah. I'm with you too. I think by season's end, if they played this game again, I'd probably be on Baylor. But I think at this point right now, I think Gonzaga has the slight edge. It's not at home, but it's at home for Gonzaga.
Right? Yeah, I would call it a home game.
It's a home game, just not at their home arena. Right. And I think it's just going to be the Gonzaga loss of Anton Watson, I think, is going to be big. We've talked about it a couple of times now where he just did a lot of things, not even things that necessarily showed up in the stat sheet. But he was just such a steadying force for that team and could guard multiple positions and really developed his offensive game by the end of his career. So now not having him, that's definitely a loss. Ben Gregg's fine. He sometimes becomes a little bit too 3-point happy. If he can hit that a little bit more consistently, I can live with it. But I think that it's just for this game. I think it's the experience of their guard play with Hickman and Nemhard that's going to put them over the edge, right? Sure, Jeremy Roach is an experienced guy, but I think between those guys and then EK, who's an experienced post-up guy, not sure how good Baylor will be at stopping him. And if Greg can knock down some open shots, which I expect him to, this offense, creates great shots because of their guards. I think early in the season for this game to be here, I think Gonzaga wins a tight one. I wouldn't be shocked if Baylor wins, but I do think that it's probably a win for Gonzaga on opening night.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Gonzaga just have too much scoring depth overall, and in a battle of elite offenses, I'm just going to take the one that I think is better. So I
Yeah.
will go with Gonzaga.
Now
Although
if,
Baylor's beaten them the last 2 times they've matched up. I mean, they beat them in the national championship a few years back, and then 2 years ago they took them down. So I don't know if there's anything like schematically that they have an edge in, but that's something maybe to look into a little bit. It's the same program, same styles,
but just much different players at this point,
and different defenses, especially with
right.
Baylor.
Yeah, for sure. But I am excited to see Edgecombe, Roach, how that works together in the backcourt for Baylor, because that could be really explosive, right? And if those two got hot, Gonzaga could go down. But for right now, I think on paper it seems like Gonzaga probably has a slight edge, as you said, in this game.
Yeah, I mean, if Gonzaga can't contain that perimeter group of Baylor, like Baylor's definitely going to win this game. They need to contain them a little bit, and if Edgecombe has to play well in order for them to win too. So,
yeah, for sure. And then the other game, this one is in Vegas, Ohio State and Texas. Ohio State, much different roster this year. They hired their interim coach from last year after firing Chris Holtmann. Texas looks quite a bit different. Dessou's gone. So they have some differences too. But this game should be a fun one. Texas in the AP poll, Ohio State not. I believe Texas is favored by 2.5 or something around there. So really another game for opening night that should be an exciting one.
Yeah, it definitely should be. I'm personally like a little bit down on both teams, especially Ohio State. And there's a lot of new pieces on both rosters, as you said. With like Michi Johnson coming back after he was here for a couple of years, went to South Carolina, came back. Micah Parrish, Sean Stewart, and Aaron Bradshaw. And like I'm personally like kind of low on all four of those guys, and they're all going to be in the starting lineup most likely. And then for Texas, you have Pope, Tremont Mark, Kaluma, and Trey Johnson. I mean, just the number 5 guy. I don't think one person has talked about this freshman at all. So maybe he surprises a bunch of people. He's got a smooth offensive game. But as you said, like 2 coaches here that we wouldn't really expect to have these jobs, especially no. Diebler. Like he got the job based off of a 9 to 10 game sample size.
No, and they did some good things, right? I mean, they really turned it around and nearly had a shot at making the tournament, right?
Right, but it's like you see that stuff with a lot of teams that fire their coach midseason. Your players automatically get super motivated, because these players almost basically got a coach fired. I mean, there's obviously different circumstances with all that.Maybe the coach was like truly the problem, but if the coach doesn't have the personnel, then you kind of have your hand. But yeah, you usually like they beat Purdue like one of the first couple games, and then they went on the road, beat Michigan State after that. So like, I think you just saw a way more motivated team last year who was kind of pissed off, that they lost their coach, and the AD kind of felt like he kind of gave up on the program for the season. But yeah, I do see there's going to be some adjustments here, and I need to really see if Diebler can run a good program and be a good coach and, make adjustments on the fly, and then on the other side, like this is another guy in Rodney Terry, this is his 3rd year there, but he was never expected to have a big name job like this. He was an assistant under Beard, and all that stuff with Chris Beard happened.
We
still have questions about Terry,
right?
Yeah, we still have questions about this guy. He went on one really good run. He had a bit of a bigger sample size, brought his team to the Elite 8. It was an elite roster, but he still took his team to the Elite 8 and probably should have been in the Final Four with that meltdown that they had. We're kind of Texas fans here, so we don't even need to talk about it. But overall, I'll give the slight edge to Texas here for a team that has a more established defense. And if there's anything Terry can do, it's coach defense. And he has some personnel here to get it done. I love Shedrick on the back line. There's not a ton of big man depth, but Shedrick's going to have to be on the floor for a while. And he's a pretty damn good rim protector, and he's super athletic. So overall, I'll give the edge to the more experienced, the deeper team in Texas to get it done in Vegas.
Yeah. I'm on Texas as well here. not just because of my bias. I just think that Texas has the better lineup, at least currently, right? The experience in the front court with Bradshaw and Sean Stewart, right? Those two in the front court, they didn't get, especially Stewart, didn't get a ton of minutes last year at Duke, and so I have my concerns. Now they obviously came out of high school as highly touted players, but I'm not sure that they're ready yet. I think they have a decent ways to go, and so I think coming in, as you said, Shedrick opening night. That's going to be a tough matchup for them, right? And Texas, they lack depth in the front court, but Shedrick should be just fine in this matchup. But I think I give the edge to Texas more so because of the job that Terry did in this offseason, right? He brought in some good pieces that you wouldn't expect. Usually it's big name coaches. Now, granted, Texas is considered a very good landing spot for a coach, or for a player. But for a guy like Terry, it's not like he's like a big name coach that's known for his recruiting. So being able to bring in Jordan Pope and Tremont Mark and Arthur Kaluma and 5-star Trey Johnson, and not to mention a couple guys off the bench, Jason Kent and Julian Larry, who are going to play roles. He brought in a very good recruiting class that's going to make an impact right away. Right now, as you said, Trey Johnson hasn't gotten a lot of screen time, but from everything that I've seen, it seems like he should be a pretty versatile scorer for them. It's just whether or not he actually is, because there hasn't been much talk of that. But I'm excited about Mark and Pope. Pope's really going to improve their shooting. Mark's going to be able to get downhill. And Kaluma is really a steady piece. He was that for Creighton a couple of years ago, last year at Kansas State, and then for whatever reason transferred again, went to Texas. But glad to have him in Austin. He's a solid player that can knock down some shots. He's a physical guy on both ends. So for this game, I think it's really Texas's game just because of the experience, as you said. And I just think they have a little bit more talent than Ohio State.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to see how the backcourt of Pope and Mark works out. They're more ball dominant guys. And, nobody really talks about Pope. I mean, he's coming from Oregon State, who was atrocious the last 2 years, but he was one of the better guards in the Pac-12 the last couple seasons. And I do think he's ready for a break. I think he brings a little bit more in the playmaking aspect of the game than what Max Abmas did last year. Max Abmas isn't the biggest playmaker there was, but I mean, yeah, he's more of a perimeter dominant guy. And, Pope's going to be able to go get you buckets late in games. He's going to be able to operate in the mid range, operate around the rim. He's a pretty underrated scorer around the rim, pretty crafty there. Him and Mark, they're going to have some things to work out early in the year, but once they start playing off each other well, I think you're going to see this team start to roll a little bit.
Yeah. And I think for Pope, I mean, he shoots the three at a high clip, 37% on, 5-6 attempts a game last year in the last 2 years at Oregon State. Right. So
yeah, he took a ton of shots there too, because he had to.
So yeah. But I think the efficiency for as bad as they were is definitely a good thing, right? Because he's no longer playing around the guys that were at Oregon State. He's playing around the guys that Texas has, and Texas should be a pretty good team. So I'm definitely excited about him. I think Texas comes out and wins this game opening night.
Yep, I agree.
Now, just some other games to quickly mention. I know you had a few you wanted to say a few words about, Cody.
Yeah, start with an early game. I believe it's being played in the Pentagon. It's St. Louis and Santa Clara, a battle between two pretty good mid-majors this season. Josh Schertz going from Indiana State to St. Louis. It'll be, and with Robbie Avila, who everybody loves, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or whatever you want to call him. But yeah, that'll be an exciting game to watch. And one of the teams I love to watch is Vermont. I'm an America East guy. Love the conference. But they're gonna go to UAB on opening night. It should be a fun game. Hopefully Vermont can keep it close. And then a couple MAC Sunbelt Challenge games with Ohio. Returning a lot of good guards, a lot of good pieces there under Jeff Bowles. He's solid. And then James Madison. They're going to be going to James Madison. Preston Spradlin moving from Morehead State, who made the tournament last year, had a lot of good pieces. That'll be a fun game to watch. And then Akron and Arkansas State is the other MAC Sunbelt Challenge game. Akron's always rock solid. And Arkansas State's kind of on the come up with Hodgson, the Nate Oates disciple. They do a lot of the same things that Alabama does, and they actually play each other next week. So that'll be an exciting game to watch as well. But I am pretty excited to watch Arkansas State in general this season.
Yeah, no, and there were just a couple games that I also had on my radar. Charleston at Southern Illinois, kind of a random one, but the reason I put it down actually is because it's the first D1 game. 12 p.m. tip on Monday, right? So for those of you that maybe are bored at work, like don't tell your boss, but there's some basketball on. Right?
That'll be the most watched Southern Illinois game easily of the season, but maybe in their program's history because it's the first game of the year.
Yeah. The next one, Maine at Duke, right? Us obviously being up here in Maine, pretty cool. They get to go down to Duke for I think the second time in the last 6 years, but a pretty cool matchup, right? Obviously, Cooper Flagg coming from Maine, getting to play against his home state school. It's a pretty cool thing on opening night. So don't expect much of a contest there, but kind of a fun game to start.
Yeah, and plus his brother Ace just committing to UMaine too. So that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. The next game, Texas A&M at UCF. Texas A&M, who's starting the season in the AP poll. Really excited to see how they play on the road in their first game. UCF, who's trying to claim themselves as also a basketball school, not just a football school. So we'll see what happens there. So that's just a game that I'm interested to see. One, how Texas A&M comes out to start the season, and two, is UCF going to be any better? The next one I had was Missouri at Memphis. Missouri, kind of a lower level SEC team in our rankings, but playing at Memphis. Memphis being one of our top mid-major schools. So just kind of an interesting game there from like a Power 5 mid-major matchup. And then the final game for me was South Florida at Florida. Really the only reason here was Florida. I'm excited to watch them, see how they come out with a little bit of a different roster this year. But I'm interested to see how South Florida comes out. A couple weeks ago, lost their coach unexpectedly. So very unfortunate thing for them there, and now have to turn around and start the season right away. So, unfortunately, very sad thing, but, I'm interested to see how they come out to start the season.
Yeah, so it's too bad for that program. I mean, they were headed in such a good direction, even though that stuff doesn't even matter. It's just worry about the family of Amir Abdur-Rahim, and, just such an unexpected loss that, it sucks for everyone. It sucks for the basketball community. It sucks for everyone that knew him and his family members too. Yeah,
for sure. So anyway, that kind of wraps up our opening night breakdown. Now the final thing we're going to do, as we talked about, is we're going to play Where'd He Transfer? So the way that this game works, we're going to play a clip from it here in a second. But the way that it works is I'm going to name a player, and Cody has to tell us where he transferred, right? Now that college basketball has become such a transfer-heavy thing, much like the NBA is in free agency, right? Guys are changing rosters year after year. Some guys have played at 4 or 5 schools, right? So the way this is going to work is we're each going to have 3 players that we're going to, name the player, and the other is going to have to name which school they transferred to. So similarly to how they do it on TNT for the NBA, Ernie Johnson names 5 players, and Charles Barkley has to tell which team they signed with or were traded to, which he is notoriously known for being horrific at. So
I think he's got an 8. I think he's gotten like 8 right in his entire time doing it. He's done it for at least 12 or 13 years.
Yeah.
Just
he's horrible, right?
Great.
I mean, they have guys that are quote unquote who he play for Hall of Famers, right? Because it just means they've gone so long without him getting it right that, here they are. So gonna play a quick clip here from that. So take a listen.
3. Let's play the game. Our first player is veteran Tom Gibson.
You had to read when he resigned. He had a whole big quote about
Gibson. Because he played for the New Jersey Nets. Oh, that would have been like this too.
No.
I wanted to get it right. I would have said the
he had a big
Charlotte Hornets.
So Charles Barkley, obviously a funny guy. He's been in the NBA forever, since the mid 80s, and he just named a team that's no longer in existence, right? They haven't been the New Jersey Nets since like 2012. And he says the New Jersey Nets for Taj Gibson, who has also never played for the Nets. So that's a whole different story.
Yeah,
but
I don't put anything past that guy. So
that's how the game's gonna work. So we can jump right into it. I can start, Cody. I can give you your first player.
Sure.
So
go ahead.
The first edition of where he transfer is Darren Saran.
Oh, I mean, this is a layup for me because I am super high on this guy. Did a lot of work on watching his film in the offseason. He's at Stanford, coming from UC Irvine. That's honest. That's a guy I was going to put in one of our previews as a breakout guy. So it's kind of a little unlucky there on your end, but that's a guy I like a lot. So
yeah, that's
do you want to go back and forth? I'll go with my first one here.
Yeah, sure.
All right, my first name is Bensley Joseph.
Oh, Bensley Joseph. That's easy. Transferred from Miami, now at Providence. Was initially supposed to be in the starting lineup there, but seems to have maybe lost favor a little bit, looking like he's going to come off the bench now. But yeah, not super high on him, but that's kind of an easy one.
Yeah.
Next one we have Kevin Overton.
Oh, Kevin Overton is a Drake guy. He's headed to Texas Tech. I think he's going to play a pretty big role there. It's a guy I like quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
So if we can run the table here.
Charles Barkley would be impressed here.
I think we could give Charles Barkley Auburn players that transferred to Auburn, and he wouldn't even get him right. So
no, he yeah.
All right, here's my number 2 guy is Braxton Mia.
Braxton Mia. Jeez.
Is in the starting lineup for this team. Projected starting lineup.
It's a Big Ten school. I know this one. For some reason, I want to say Rutgers. I know it's red. Is
that a final answer?
No. Oh, you know where he is? He took the place of Rink Mast. He's at Nebraska.
He did. That's correct.
Right?
Technically transferred from Big Ten school to Big Ten school for coming from Washington. So
yeah.
I think he's a fifth. I think he's a 5th-year guy now. So
yeah, he's going to have to step up for them. You know, they got masked out for the season, so yeah, he's definitely going to have to play a solid role. So my final one for you is Scotty Iboob or Booby.
Oh, this is Wyoming. I honestly can't remember where he's coming from, but
I don't remember.
He's coming from a MVC school, maybe. But either way, did a little work on him in the offseason. He's interesting. I believe he's like a 35% free throw shooter in his career too. So it's not a
that ought to work out well.
Yeah, he'll play a little bit of a role for them, but nothing crazy.
All right, we're 5 for 5. I mean, can we
doing pretty well? We almost had a little slip up, but we got it done. This last one might get you. I don't know. He's not super well known. This will be his third school, but the name is Glenn Taylor Jr.
Glenn Taylor Jr. You might have gotten me here. I remember working on him a little bit. Yeah. No.
He is in the projected starting lineup. I personally don't think he's going to be like a 25 to 30 minute a game guy. He's going to be a guy that's in and out of the starting lineup, but he will have a role here.
Is he at Minnesota?
He's not.
No.
He's at Oklahoma.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That definitely was not on my radar. Oklahoma is a team that I definitely am not that high on, and so didn't spend a ton of time on them. Remember doing some work with Glenn Taylor, but with all these transfers, it's tough.
It's so tough in this era to decipher where all the transfers go. I mean,
who was it? Charlie Moore a couple years ago that had played at 4 schools.
Yeah, he started at like DePaul, went somewhere in between, and went to Miami.
Went to like somewhere out west. Then he went to Miami. He played at Kansas for a year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
he's been all over the place. So, all right, 5 out of 6, I guess. You know, you have a leg up on me there. Not sure what that says about you and college basketball knowledge, but
yeah, it's either it's either a really bad thing or a good thing. I'm not really sure which one it is.
Yeah, but anyway, that was just a fun thing we thought we'd do before the season. Just with so much player movement, but that's it for today's episode. You know, if you want to listen to the first 2 episodes, we do have them up on both Spotify and YouTube now. And also, you know, continue to check out our website, mainlyhoops.com, our Twitter and Instagram, as we're posting now pretty much every day, right? We have new content, new articles going out every day. And I know, Cody, you're going to be posting your opening night bets here in the next day or two, or obviously in the next day.
Yeah, that should be up on Sunday night, maybe Monday morning. It depends on when all the lines officially come out. There's some that are out already, but just gonna wait till Sunday night to release that. Yeah,
cool. So you know, continue to keep up on the socials and listen to the podcast episodes. Really appreciate the listens and look forward to next time.